And I am live. How's it going, everybody out there? Jenny Topping, Gold Medal Training. I am broadcasting today on my Gold Medal Training page because why wouldn't I, right? I had somebody message me and say that my friend requests are full on Jenny Topping, so they can't see my live feeds if I don't add them, or if I can't add them. So I'm going to be doing my live feeds from now on through my business page, this way that everybody can have access to my live feeds. So anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about how to create leaders on the field, specifically catchers. Before I go into that, I think every time I try to teach you guys a little bit about me, show you some of my pictures and tell you some stories. So today I have one that you won't be able to read, but you can check out. So I'm gonna flip this sucker over so you can. So this, sort of hard to read, is from when I played in Japan. So this is an award they give out, they pick after every season in Japan the best players at each position, and so this was awarded to me as this might have been for hitting or catching, I don't know which one. So I have a couple of these from playing in Japan, which is kind of cool because Japan, the Japan League's a tough league, and so it was a really cool honor to be able to be a top 9 player in Japan. So, all right, people are starting to come on. It's getting warm. Love this heat coming in. I'm gonna get going so that I know a lot of people like to watch it from the beginning and watch it later. So, all right. I wrote some notes this time. I think it's helpful so that I can try to stay on track. And if anybody has questions as we go along, feel free to shoot them out at me. So, this has been a topic that I've worked on for a long time. Is I work with catchers consistently, and how do you make them leaders? How do you make them aggressive? How do you get them to communicate, run the field, things of that sort? I think that it is not an easy thing to get catchers to do, or players to do in general, to lead the field. So I think it takes some practice. And so setting goals is always, one of my key things that I'm trying to get teams and players and families to do. So So I have a couple goals that I would suggest that you can work on with your kids, and then some ways to implement it into practice. So first of all, I'd say let your catchers lead in practice. So it's very common for coaches in practice to do situational hitting, right? So, the coach will have the bat and you'll say there's a runner on first with no outs, and then, as a coach, you'll hit the ball, and, the kids have to make the adjustments from there. I think one of the greatest tools that you can do is the catcher has the ball. You tell her what the situation is, and she has to direct the situation, and then she'll give you the ball. So, if you say, hey, we've got a runner on first with no outs, she's going to step out in front. She's going to say, hey, we got no outs, runner on first. Infield, go 2, outfield, go 2, or, whatever the situation. Never know on a bunt. We got speed on 1. So, and then you'll hand the ball to the coach as a catcher, and then, the coach, drives the ball or bunts it or does whatever. The ball comes back into the catcher. The catcher does not hand the ball to the coach until she knows the situation and she directs it to her teammates. So the coach is no longer saying, this is the situation. The catcher knows that this is my job every single time, is to direct before I hand the ball over. And, if you're using live runners, which I suggest is always helpful, whether you're doing situations with another team or if you're fortunate enough to have enough players that have base runners, you know, you can make it as advanced as, you know, hey, we've got speed on one. We need to make sure that it's a hard hit ball in order for us to get the lead out at 2. So you can have your catchers go into some more information rather than just the basic of, you know, runner on second base, infield check 2, go 1. I think it's also important when the catcher is directing that she's consistent in how she lays it out. And so for me, I prefer verbal and vocal of the outs. So we've got no outs, we've got 1 out, we've got 2 outs. The runner is where, or the runners are, multiple runners are where. We're going to direct the infield, and then we're going to direct the outfield. Again, as we get older, I would say 14U on, if we've been very consistent at directing that way. As we get older, then we don't have to be so strategic with that. We can direct in different manners, give important cues, things of that sort. So that would be my first basic, is introducing it into practice and being consistent. You know, I know in college we did situations just about every single day. So if every single time you do it, you have your catchers working on being the ones that are directing, I think that you'll see that they'll get more comfortable doing it, and they'll get quicker at it. I think that's the main thing, is sometimes when we're younger as a catcher, we need some time to think about it, and we may not have that time. So again, if it's consistently in the play of your practice, every time you do situations, the catcher is doing the directing before she hands you the ball. This will get her really comfortable with directing. So then, you know, setting goals going into the game, I mean, I think it's pretty simple. Every single time a runner gets on base, a catcher should come out in front and direct. And personally, I think they should be almost halfway between the pitcher and the catcher. So they need to move out a little bit so that they're showing everybody that I'm taking control. I see a lot of catchers that'll do some directing, but they're standing behind the plate. And so it looks very passive. We want to be assertive, aggressive. We want to be in control. And so, you know, rewarding your catchers for doing that. So coaches or parents, you can also do this, is, you know, every time they go out, you know, they're earning a certain amount of points towards something that they want. You know, I'm really big on incentivizing kids to set and achieve goals. So one thing I see a lot of too is a kid will come out and, hey, we got no outs, you know, or we got 1 out, no outs, whatever, runner on first base, and then the bunt goes down, runner goes to second, we don't redirect. So I think it's important, friendlies, practices, anytime you're scrimmaging yourselves in practice, anytime that you are playing in friendlies, is, you know, making that a goal, is they have to consistently direct. So I think once they have those basics down of their consistently directing, which I think takes some time for kids to be consistent at that, but I think once they have that, then we can take the next step. So the next step to me is that the catcher always need to know who's coming up to bat the next inning. So whether they're talking to the scorekeeper or whether they can remember, we need to be able to come out, balls in, coming down, throw the ball down to second. Everybody does their throw around, whether they meet in the circle or they stay at their positions. At that point, that's the job of the catcher to say, hey, we've got 3, 4, and 5 are up. Number 3 batter hit a ground ball to the 5-6 hole. Remember last time between you, Bustos, and Natasha? And they go, oh yeah, I remember that. Okay, cool. Let's get this first out. Lead out, okay? So then we get in the squat. That first batter does whatever she does, and then our job would be then to be like, hey, we got no outs or whatever the situation is, 1 out, runner on first base, number 4 batter up. This is what she did last time. So, you know, if they do something like strikeout or walk, you don't necessarily need to direct that, but if they, you know, they got a hit or they hit something, a long fly ball, or if we just want a side of the field to be present, I think, you know, some kids spray, meaning they hit to all fields when they hit. Some kids just hit to one specific side. So I think sometimes just cluing in the infield or the outfield, hey, the ball came your way last time, let's be heads up, just so we're a little more prepared and focused for the ball. So the best way I would suggest is for the scorekeeper, usually is very close to the dugout anyways, but I would suggest that the scorekeeper is close to the dugout and the catcher gets comfortable with Every time she comes off the field, we have 3 outs. We go back into the dugout. At some point, as the catcher, we need to go over to the scorekeeper and get comfortable asking those questions. Hey, who's coming up next? If we don't remember, she'll say 3, 4, and 5. And if there's any important information, that's when the scorekeeper would give it to her. Hey, she hit a line drive up the middle, or whatever the case may be. This is what 3, 4, and 5 did, or 4, 5, and 6 did. I think it's also extremely important that catcher know the purpose of every person in the lineup. So if you watched my live video a couple weeks ago on a catcher calling her own game, we need to know what the first batter's job is, the second batter, the third, and on through the lineup. What are they trying to do when they're coming up to bat? And I think if we know that, we can help prepare people. Reminding people of runner stealing. I think that happens a lot where most of the time when a runner steals third base, they're stealing it off the shortstop, not the catcher. And so our job as a catcher is to always know who's covering. So, I go over this in my facility quite a bit. There are some different scenarios that may happen. There may be a runner on second base with no outs, but for instance, someone like me is up. A third baseman's not going to play in my face for a bunt because she doesn't want the ball being drilled down her throat. So she may play middle ground, and that's when miscommunications happen. So I think anytime that you can do a whiteboard workout where you can discuss with your teammates some of those situations that may come up that are a little different. Runner on second base, we'd normally be playing up for the bunt. We now have someone that hits the ball a little bit harder. How are we going to play this? Who's going to cover? Things of that sort. Catcher always needs to know who's covering the bases, and they need to remind people, right? Hey, we got a runner on second base. This is a bunt situation. She's trying to get to third. Okay, never know on the steal. Who's got bag? Who's got bag? So things like that. I also, whether you want to make it a positive or a negative, reinforcement, I always set goals with my kids about calling timeout before their coaches do. So as a catcher, we need to kind of start reading when we think that the team needs a timeout. So I just wrote down a couple of situations that might happen. So let's say, our pitcher just walks the batter, the next batter comes up, we decide not to go out to the mound after that walk. That would be a good time to go out to the mound, but we decide, okay, we're not going to go out to the mound yet. I think she's okay. Pitcher gets back on the mound, and the first pitch she throws for a ball. Okay, whether we go out right after the walk or after the first ball, one of the two, we need to be going out there. We don't need to wait for our coaches to call timeout. As a catcher, that's our job to recognize there's something going on with our pitcher. She needs help. Let's slow her down. Let's call timeout. Let me go talk to her. Again, setting goals with your catchers. Hey, you're going to earn points every time you go out to the mound before I do as a coach. So every time you recognize that your team needs this. Another situation that's great for calling timeout is when your teammate makes an error. Whether they're someone that chronically gets down on themselves or from making an error, or it's a critical time in the game and someone makes an error. Again, as a catcher, we need to tell your teammates you just farted on the umpire. Whatever gets them to loosen up and the fact that it's a stressful situation. I think it's important to always remind everybody, hey, we cannot be a hero without being willing to make mistakes. So this is our opportunity as a team to see what we're made of and go for it. So let's see. Yeah, I think that's all I have written down for this one. I think the big thing is implement some sort of directing from our catcher in practice and getting consistently doing it. They're just naturally going to do it in the game. So any questions? A couple of you guys are still watching. I appreciate you guys all coming on. All right, 2:44. I think I'm happy with that one. I'm going to share it. Thank you all for coming on. Jenny Topping Gold Medal Training. Go back and watch the video if you didn't catch it. I think it's good information. So thank you guys for coming on. Have a wonderful Thursday. Bye.